Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome back to another thrilling episode of Delta Deep with Roscoe, the show where we explore the eerie, the unexplained, and the downright spooky. I'm your host, Roscoe, and tonight we've got a couple of spine-tingling tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. But before we dive into the mysteries, I have a quick announcement. Our monthly coffee meetup has been postponed. I know, it's a bummer. But there's a good reason for it. My nephew is coming back to town, and family comes first, right? So we'll reschedule that coffee date soon. Keep an eye on our socials for the new date and time. All right, back to the spooky stuff. Tonight we have two stories lined up for you. The first one comes from the late Bill Harper. Now, Bill was a bit of a local legend himself, always had a knack for telling stories that sent shivers down your spine. Fun fact, Bill passed away before I was even born, and trust me, I'm older than dirt. So, the story has some serious staying power. One of his relatives recorded his audio account of something he experienced up north. While I can't play the whole clip verbatim, there's some private info in there. I've been given the green light to use it at my discretion. So grab your favorite drink, dim the lights, and get ready to journey into the unknown with me. Let's get started. All right, folk, why don't y'all dim those lights and settle in? Because the tale I'm about to share comes from the fog-shrouded shores of Nova Scotia. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's a guy like me doing telling stories about some far-off Canadian coast? Well, let's just say a good story knows no borders, and this one's a real spine-tingler. Our story begins back in 1897 in a small fishing village called Millbrook Cove. Now, Millbrook wasn't much to look at. Just a handful of weather-beaten houses, a single street of shops, and the ever-present smell of salt and fish, but it was home to some hardy folk who'd weathered more storms than you could count. The pride of Millbrook Cove was its lighthouse, standing tall on a rocky outcrop just offshore. For generations, the Mackenzie family had tended that light, keeping ships safe from the jagged coastline. Our tale focuses on the last of the Mackenzies, old Tom Mackenzie, a man as weathered as the rocks he lived on. Tom was a curious sort. Quiet, they said. Kept to himself mostly. Folks in town only saw him once a month when he'd row over for supplies. Some said it was just the solitude of lighthouse keeping that made him odd. Others whispered of stranger things. You see, over the years, peculiar stories had started to circulate about Tom and his lighthouse. Fishermen swore they'd seen eerie green lights flickering in the tower windows on moonless nights. Others claimed to hear haunting melodies carried on the wind, songs in no language they'd ever heard before. But life in Millbrook Cove carried on, as it always had. That is, until the storm of '97 hit. It was a monster of a tempest, the likes of which hadn't been seen in living memory. Waves as tall as church steeples battered the coast, and the wind howled like 1,000 banshees. As the townsfolk huddled in their homes praying for salvation, all eyes turned to the lighthouse. Would Tom's light be strong enough to guide ships to safety? But on that fateful night, the lighthouse stood dark. When the storm finally broke 3 days later, a group of men, led by the mayor, rowed out to the lighthouse to check on old Tom. What they found, according to the official account, was a lighthouse devastated by the storm. The structure had been so badly damaged that it had caught fire, burning to the ground before anything could be done. And poor Tom Mackenzie, well, they said he must have been swept away by the storm or perished in the fire. A tragic accident, nothing more. A new automated lighthouse was eventually built, its light sweeping across the waves just as it had for over a century. And that, folks, was where the story ended, or so we thought. You see, something happened that turned this old tale on its head. One of the men who'd gone out to the lighthouse that day, old Bill Harper, was on his deathbed, and what he revealed in his final hours shed new light on the mysteries of Millbrook Cove. According to Bill, what they found in that lighthouse was far more terrifying than any storm. The inside was a mess of overturned furniture and scattered papers, true enough, but Bill spoke of something the report left out: the walls. Every inch of space was covered in strange symbols, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move if you looked at them too long. They were drawn in a deep, rusty red that no one wanted to identify. But that wasn't the worst of it. Bill's shaken voice spoke of a trap door they'd found, hidden beneath an old rug. When they opened it, a stench rose from below, a mixture of brine, decay, and something else. something that made their skin crawl and their minds recoil. Against their better judgment, they descended into a vast chamber beneath the lighthouse. The walls were damp, covered in a strange phosphorescent moss that cast an eerie glow. But it was what lay in the center of the room that turned their blood to ice. Now, to truly grasp the horror of what they encountered, I'll let you hear from Bill Harper himself. This recording was made shortly before he passed, and it's the only time he spoke about that night.
We found it down there, something not human. Long arms, tentacles for a face, strange marks on the walls, a horrible smell. We should never have gone. It wasn't for us to see. We crossed a line. I'm sorry, Tom.
There in a pool of brackish water lay a creature. It was vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were too long. Its fingers ended in wicked claws. Its skin was a sickly pale green, and where its face should have been, there was only a mass of writhing tentacles. The creature was hunched over something, an ancient barnacle-encrusted chest that seemed to pulse with an unholy light. Bill said they fled in terror, nearly tripping over each other in their haste to escape, but they knew they couldn't let whatever was down there continue to exist. In a moment of desperate courage, they decided to destroy it all. They gathered every bit of lamp oil and kerosene they could find in the lighthouse and set it ablaze. As they rowed away, the lighthouse became an inferno against the gray sky. The flames seemed to burn with an unnatural intensity, and Bill swore he could hear unearthly shrieks coming from beneath the waves. They watched from the shore as the structure collapsed in on itself, hoping that the fire would purge whatever evil had taken root there. By unspoken agreement, they decided to keep the truth of what lay beneath the lighthouse a secret. They concocted the story of the storm damage and fire, unable to face the reality of what they'd seen. In the years that followed, Bill said the nightmares never stopped. He spoke of monstrous shapes seen in the waves on dark nights, of Tom's voice carried on the wind, calling for help, or singing those eerie, otherworldly melodies. Now, folks, I can't say for certain what really happened in that lighthouse all those years ago. But Bill Harper went to his grave swearing every word was true. And to this day, the people of Millbrook Cove steer well clear of that rocky outcrop. For who knows what secrets might have survived beneath the ashes and waves. So next time you find yourself on the shores of Nova Scotia and you see a lonely lighthouse in the distance, ask yourself what lies beneath those quiet waters. And remember, some secrets are best left in the depths where they belong. Well, folks, I'm going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. I got one more tale to share with you. Be right back. Evening, folks. You found your way back to Roscoe's Weekly Tales? And tonight, I've got something a little different to share with y'all. Something from the late 70s, when De Leon County was my regular stomping ground. It's one of those memories that's been gnawing at me for years. One that starts out simple enough, but, well, you'll see. So picture it, 1978, middle of a hot and sticky Texas summer. I was spending some time down in De Leon County taking care of some business. And when I say business, I mean a lady friend. Now, I ain't one to kiss and tell, so we'll leave her out of it. But just know I was on my way back from a very pleasant evening. But the funny thing about that night wasn't how it started. It's what happened after. Or maybe what didn't happen, depending on how you look at it. Now, I should mention something about the wheels I was driving that night. See, I had just gotten myself a brand new Dodge Power Wagon. Beautiful truck, tough as nails and shiny as a new penny. Hadn't had it but a few days when I made a rather unfortunate error in judgment. Now, we don't need to go into details, but it involved a dirt road, a sharp turn, and a rock I swear wasn't there before. Let's just say the Power Wagon was out of commission for a bit, which left me with my brother Henry's Oldsmobile. And let me tell you, Henry's Olds was a beast of a car, long and heavy, like it was carved from solid steel. The kind of car you could probably drive through a brick wall and come out the other side without a scratch. But she had her quirks, that Olds. There was this odd clatter under the hood whenever you pushed her too hard, like she was protesting every mile over 50. Henry said it was just a quirk, but it always made me a little nervous. Anyway, that's what I was driving. Big, clunky Oldsmobile, rolling through those southern back roads. Must have been around 11, maybe midnight. You know the kind of night. Air so thick with humidity you could cut it with a knife. Cicadas singing loud enough to drown out your thoughts. And not another soul on the road for miles. I wasn't in any particular rush. No one waiting on me back home. Just me and the road stretching out under that heavy Texas sky. The stars were out, brighter than usual. Almost like they had front row seats to whatever was going to happen next. I'd driven this way before a couple times, enough to know it by heart. But there was something about that night, something in the air. Not enough to give you a shiver, just enough to keep you aware, if that makes sense. So there I was, cruising along, thinking about nothing in particular, when I spotted a little road sign ahead. Carlton. Now, Carlton wasn't exactly what you'd call a town. Heck, if it wasn't for that sign, you'd barely know it existed. Just a couple of buildings, one of them looking like it had given up on life a long time ago. Most folks, they'd drive right through and never even think to remember the name. And if it weren't for this particular night, I probably wouldn't have remembered it either. But there it was, Carlton. A place so small it felt like it wasn't even real. Just a blip in the landscape, like somebody had forgotten to erase it from the map. No streetlights, no other cars, just the glow of my headlights stretching out in front of me. The road narrowed, trees crowding in on both sides like they were trying to hide whatever lay beyond them. I'll admit I was a little on edge, but not for any reason I could put my finger on. Just one of those nights where your instincts tell you something ain't quite right, even if everything seems normal enough. As I came into what might pass for the center of town, I rolled up on a stop sign. Just a simple little red sign perched on a pole. The kind you'd see anywhere, though it seemed out of place in a town this quiet. I eased the olds to a stop. No reason to rush, and certainly no traffic to wait on. And that's when it happened. I swear, as soon as the car came to a full stop, I heard it. Clear as day, but quiet, like it was coming from the back of my own mind. A voice, just a whisper that said, "Take it slow." Now, I ain't one to spook easy, but I've learned over the years to trust those moments when something just feels off. So I stayed there at that stop sign for a moment, longer than I needed to, just sitting in the silence, listening to the low hum of the engine idling. And then, without thinking about it, I turned my head, glanced into the back seat, empty, just like it should have been. Still, my skin prickled a bit, like maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I shook it off, chalked it up to being out too late, and started to turn the car to the right. I made the turn real slow, just like that voice had said, taking my time. I didn't get more than 10 feet before I saw it. A big black dog, real large, think like a Rottweiler, came trotting across the road right in front of me. Even in the dim light of the old's headlights, I could see it clear as day. There was a heavy chain wrapped around its neck, dragging behind it, and the sound of that metal scraping against the road sent a shiver right through me. It was one of those chains you'd expect to see holding something back, not attached to a dog just walking free. The dog didn't pay me much mind at first. It crossed in front of the olds, its broad shoulders rising and falling with each step like it owned the road. But as it passed the front of the car, it slowed, turned its head, and locked eyes with me through the windshield. Now, folks, I've seen all kinds of things in my time, some strange, some beautiful, and some downright terrifying, but the look in that dog's eyes, it was something else. There was something knowing in the way it looked at me, like it saw straight through the glass, past my face, and down into something deeper. It trotted past the driver's side of the Oldsmobile, slow and deliberate, and I could hear that chain dragging across the pavement, scraping like nails on a chalkboard. My heart was beating just a little faster now, but I wasn't about to move. Not yet. I was worried that heavy chain might get caught under the car, and I didn't want to hurt the poor thing. The dog circled the car once. Then again, each time it passed, I could feel the weight of its presence, like it was taking its time to size me up. The third time it came around, that chain clinked and scraped against the asphalt, following the rhythm of the dog's steady gait. I sat there watching, listening, waiting. Then, just as quietly as it had appeared, the dog finished its third loop and turned away, back the way it had come. It disappeared into the trees, that chain rattling behind it until the sound faded into the night. I stayed there a moment longer, letting the silence fill the space where the dog had been. My hands tight on the wheel, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been judged in some way, measured. Finally, I took a deep breath and let the O's roll forward again. Well, folks, I gotta say, after that night, one thing's for sure. If I hadn't gone slow when I made that turn, I probably would have hit that dog dead on. And the strange thing that's always stuck with me, it wasn't like I was thinking about it. That voice in my head telling me to take it slow, I didn't question it then, and I don't question it now. Just one of those weird little moments, a coincidence maybe. But a part of me still wonders if it was something more. You see, there's a bit of lore around black dogs, especially ones that seem to appear out of nowhere. Some say they're omens, sometimes of death, sometimes of protection. Now, I ain't gonna claim I know for sure what I saw that night or why it circled my car 3 times before disappearing, but I'll tell you this, that dog didn't seem like it meant me harm, and I was glad I listened to that voice. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed what I had for y'all tonight. This has been your host, Roscoe. Y'all take care now, and remember, take it slow. Well, folks, I gotta say, after that night, one thing's for sure. If I hadn't gone slow when I made that turn, I probably would have hit that dog dead on. And the strange thing that's always stuck with me, it wasn't like I was thinking about it. That voice in my head telling me to take it slow, I didn't question it then, and I don't question it now. Just one of those weird little moments, a coincidence, maybe. But a part of me still wonders if it was something more. You see, there's a bit of lore around black dogs, especially ones that seem to appear out of nowhere. Some say they're omens, sometimes of death, sometimes of protection. Now, I ain't gonna claim I know for sure what I saw that night or why it circled my car 3 times before disappearing. But I'll tell you this. That dog didn't seem like it meant me harm, and I was glad I listened to that voice. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed what I had for y'all tonight. This has been your host, Roscoe. Y'all take care now, and remember, take it slow.